All right, guys. So we're back. Um, Hi, Gina.
What's up, Ray? How you doing?
Uh, you always have coffee. I feel like I should have coffee. I mean, it's not as early, this
Yeah, you're right. What time is it? It's like 10 o'clock here, Eastern
yeah,
Standard Time.
yeah,
Yeah,
10:02.
this is my first cup, but I've been up since 7.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so actually going like 3 hours without it, I literally had to have a sip as soon as I got on with you. I was like, I have to sip. My God.
Oh yeah.
So I do, but I just want to let you know, remember I told you my mug broke?
Oh yeah.
The one that I had before. Okay, that mug is totally gone. That was a
As
gift.
it should have been. I mean,
I tried to crazy glue it, and then my fingers got stuck,
yeah.
and that was a hot mess. I was I was being on the phone with you while I'm trying to crazy glue my old mug, and you're like, "Please stop." And I was like, "I'm going to stop." And I'm like this, like. So here's my new mug. Paying homage to Massachusetts. So it's Dunkin' Donuts. So as you can see, it has little descriptions about everything that has to do with Massachusetts, like candlepin bowling. This one here talks about the
Oh
Cape
yeah.
Cod, the North Shore,
Hmm.
Patriots Day, the Commonwealth, Jimmy's. Everybody knows about Jimmy's, and
Mom, like I don't know what Jimmy's is.
yeah. So, but the great thing about this mug, it has like some really key points that we're going to discuss, as far as like things that are historic, things
True.
that are wicked.
Yeah.
In this case, here's wicked good, but that's the point. Yeah, right. Then of course, we have Patriots Day. Like as far as like things that are historic, this one here talks about the Mayflower and Pilgrims. So now that with everything going on here in 2020, as we had talked about previously, with everything that's going on, the whole George Floyd situation that has erupted to bring out the systemic racism here in America, and we had left off at what's next, right? What are we
Yeah.
gonna do? But because we ended up getting emails,
Yes, we did.
questions, I was like, yay! I was like, so thank you all for sending questions, because
Yeah.
this is our Q&A section, Q&A portion of Ethnic AF. So, I'm so happy. Ray, definitely, we're gonna go through questions. We'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I have to put a disclaimer. Can't speak for Ray because he definitely went to school for it. But for me, I did not go to school I don't have anything in regards to mental, let me see. I don't have a degree in psychology, psychiatry. I don't work in human services. I am not a co-founder of any protest or any organization that involves human services. I'm sorry, any other disclaimer? Basically, what I'm trying to say is, for me answering the questions, it's really based on just my knowledge of things,
Yeah.
not it's not fact. Okay, I am not going to go through resources to answer your questions. I don't want to say like, oh, I don't want anybody to go out there and be like, oh, well, Gina said so. Gina's right. Nope. I just gave you my opinion. You can run with it, or you can go fact check it somewhere else, right?
Yep, and of course my house phone has to ring and be incredibly loud. But I guess that was, one of the best things about doing this first thing in the morning is, house
Yeah,
phone.
you're gonna get that. You're gonna
Shouldn't be, no, absolutely not. Most
get
likely nobody important. But
that.
yeah, no, and even for me, disclaimer, I can only answer things to the best of my own knowledge. And yeah, so hopefully any of the questions that we answer are, helpful. And um, I'm not gonna say I hope that they make somebody happy or whatever. I like, just answering to the best of our knowledge and,
Mhm.
you know, um,
And also,
striking conversations
just
is what we're really
yeah,
here.
exactly, it starts the conversation. I think
Yeah.
that's probably where we're all about here on Ethnic AF is, let's just start the conversation. It shouldn't be uncomfortable. We know there're going to be uncomfortable situations, right?
Yeah.
But to start the conversation and to get to know where everybody's mind is, that allows us to be more open and to be able to come up with solutions. It's like
Yeah.
working in a team. That's
Yeah,
how
and
I see
speaking
it.
of, conversations that, are needing to be had, I was actually speaking with my friend Chris the other day, and we were talking about one of the conversations that we had during our soapbox last week,
Mhm.
which was about voting. And he was telling me how, when it comes to voting in like the presidential elections, he was just like, oh, it almost doesn't feel worth it, because you'll vote for whoever you think is the best candidate, and then either the other candidate wins or anything like that, but it's just almost like your vote doesn't matter, because
Right.
whatever happens, and the electoral college kind of runs the show, kind of thing. And
Yes,
that
he's
seems
right.
to be, that's right. The electoral college does make the final decision when it
Right.
comes to the presidential election, as we definitely saw in 2016, where
Let's not talk about that.
yeah, exactly. But that's what happened. Whereas the final count was Donald Trump had less of the popular vote, and yet won the election because of the electoral college.
Right.
And that's
And,
that's not opinion. That's literally fact. Where
and the
where the
reason
numbers
why,
were
yeah, and
is
the reason for the electoral college is because of the senators and the
Mhm.
people that are voted into office, right? So this is where, for your friend, and how I spoke about it in our previous episode was, it really doesn't start from the top, right? You're he's right in the sense where, like, what's the sense in voting? It's like, I already know who I wanted to vote for. In this case here, let's say it was not for Donald Trump. He didn't want to vote for him, right? But he knew that his vote wasn't going to count, being the popular vote. But what happens is it depends on who you have in your state and who are they voting for, right?
Yeah.
So it really goes down to really your local government. That's where it starts, right? So it's your mayor, it's your whoever your selectman is. It's also city council. It's also it's everybody that is in your community that you decided to vote for in your community. Who are they representing,
Mhm.
right? Because you can have a person that says, "Oh, you know, um, Mayor Joe Smith, oh, he's great. He's such a great guy. He's done this, this, and this, but he supports Trump." And you're not a supporter of him, right? But, you didn't vote, right? But others did and got him in. Your
Mhm.
voice wasn't heard. So that's where it counts. So to speak for your friend, it's like he's right. The electoral college is what actually gets the president in. And until we can, to be honest, I wish we could just get rid of electoral college, because I think it's ridiculous. I don't even, it's just another way of keeping us from our democracy to vote for who we want,
Yeah.
right? But instead, we have to vote all these little men or women in office, and it's like this little trickle down, right? Like it's like we can't shout far enough, because we have other people shouting for us, and depending on who those people we have in office, they're probably not going to speak for us, for you, for I, and especially when it comes to the color of your skin, who you are, what town do you live in, is it
Yeah.
predominantly white? Because if it is, sure enough, they're all going to rally together and they know who they're going to vote for. So these are the things that you're going to have to realize. Like, when you live, as we get older, we live in this, the 18, 24-year-olds, we live in this like ignorance is bliss kind of moment where it's like, oh, I'm not worried about voting. I'm not worried about that. This is America. We're really fine. Another group of people that are not affected by it is like rich people,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Mhm.
if you're filthy rich, who cares? You just like, as long as you don't tax me, I'm great, right?
Yeah.
But I'm sure your friend gets taxed.
Mm.
So yeah, so as your friend goes, yeah, I think he's definitely right. But it's, let's start small, right?
Yeah.
That's where your voice gets heard. So one of my advice to your friend, what's his name?
Chris.
So for Chris, it's like, what he should do is, I don't know what town or city he lives in, but start looking at who's representing that town and city, and go online. Normally, if you go on your website of their city or town, it gives you a list of everybody, and some of them have bios that you can read. Another thing is like the school committee. A lot of times, the people who are in the school committee are the ones that are going to transition into your town and city to make those decisions, because that's where it really all starts from.
Yeah.
So that's where I would say to start at, right? Look at your school committee, see what they're doing for the school, and how they represent the school, where their budgets are, but even start smaller than that. Just find out who they are. Maybe it's a person that is a neighbor of yours. Yeah. Talk to them, so don't ever feel like you can't talk to anybody. That's the thing. You should be able to email somebody, especially if they're, in City Hall or whatever, or pick up the phone and say, hey, listen, I'm a citizen, and we're living in this town. I've been in this town for X amount of years. I have a question. And they need to get back to you. Mm-hmm. So, and believe me, your voice will get heard because we have social media now. So all you have to say is, so Chris could be like, oh, what? Oh, Mayor Joe Smith didn't want to get back to me. Okay, well, guess what? Instagram, like Facebook, Twitter, they're all over there, right? So think about it. Years ago, we didn't have social media. Now we do. So we have a huge platform to actually speak our minds now. So if you can't get the answers heard, or answers, if they can't answer your questions for whatever reason, that's when you put them on blast. So that's your research, Chris.
And we have more questions. So we had somebody named Little Miss Anon who, sent us a slew of questions. So we'll start. And I think one that I really like, which she sent a couple of questions kind of all in one, but one part that really stuck out to me was, do you believe that the United States should do something similar to Germany and try to be more ashamed and conscious of its history of slavery? And I really like that. And I'm like, I think to a certain extent, the United States as a whole is somewhat, I guess you can say ashamed, but it is somewhat conscious of its history of slavery. But at the same time, it also kind of doesn't even think about it. Like it's really weird. And I don't know how Germany addresses its history when it comes to World War II and the Holocaust and that whole era. I've met Germans before, especially when I was in college and things like that, and I've heard a couple of different, I guess, versions of life in Germany now. I've heard where for a time period they didn't teach about the Holocaust. I've also heard where they teach it and tell a sort of different story. So I don't necessarily know how life in Germany is and whether or not it's kind of, I guess, not necessarily shading what went on during that time period or not. But here, like, I lived in South Carolina from I did 8th grade, and then I did freshman, sophomore, and I didn't have a junior year of high school. I did freshman, sophomore, and then I was a senior because I skipped a school year. And in 8th grade, they teach South Carolina history as a history course. Like, that's your 8th grade history class. And South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union. And, slavery was a big part of South Carolina's, history. And that was a big part of our history class, so it's a big part of your grade to learn the South Carolina history of slavery and things like that. So it's definitely not something that, the state is ashamed of teaching. And one of the things that I learned while down there, which I was honestly shocked about learning, and I was like, oh my God, and this is still a thing today, is what they call the corridor of shame, which, Gina, where we live here and literally straight through my city is Highway I-95. That connects all of the states going from Maine all the way to Florida. It's all of the East Coast. And along Highway 95, basically cuts through every state. Along that, highway is the corridor of shame, which is the poorest district of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia.
Wow.
because of those, the highway cut it through those states and made it so that, those people were not getting the business that the older highways were needing. Because if you are, traveling through the states, if you're on 95, you're not necessarily getting off the highway to stay in a hotel. Like a lot of those older highways that used to be used were, they weren't necessarily interstates, so you'd have to get off and go to one of the motels or anything like that. So basically the interstate cut off the circulation of people needing to go into the towns and things like that.
Hmm.
So those, if you go and look it up, anyone that's watching, or even Gina, if you've never heard of the corridor of shame,
No,
go
never
and
have.
look it up after this video. The corridor of shame is really, really saddening
Well, I'll
because
definitely look
the
at that.
the housing, it honestly will make you look back at how people are living, because they're living in, almost like the 1800s.
That's
It's
crazy.
awful. And, it's almost like looking at what life was like either, during slavery or almost after. And a lot of the people that are living there are people of color and, poor white people as
Or
well.
right.
But it's a really bad thing to learn. And to learn that as a kid who had just moved to the South, literally a month and a half before, and it was, a really saddening thing to learn, along with learning about slavery and things like that. But there wasn't a lot of, shame or, I guess consciousness of learning it. And a lot of the, students around me were, students of color, mainly, black students and white students, because there's not much or any diversity in South Carolina, especially not compared to living here in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Yeah.
So I honestly wouldn't say that there was any shame, I guess. And I don't really think that there's much shame in the United States at all. It's just a part of our history as, I guess, America. But
Yeah.
to answer the question, I don't necessarily think that the United States should, you know, be ashamed of it. I think that we should just try and accept it, but then move past it, because we need to not keep that same mindset of holding people back. um we haven't gotten past that mindset to a certain, like, it's just kind of, I think, evolved from putting chains, literally physical chains, on people to mental chains, and I see that a lot.
Yeah. And also just to piggyback on that email regarding, you know, the US and if they should do something similar to Germany. So for me, when I had traveled to Germany on a work trip back in like 2005, and and it's a beautiful country, and also I stayed in Luxembourg. So I'm sure people might know the level of history when it came to like World War, and how, Poland, Luxembourg, all them, those were all countries that were taken over by Germany at that time. And so going there, of course, years later after World War, it was funny. One of my coworkers had said to me, we were in a restaurant in Luxembourg, and we saw like this like group of German military professionals there, and they were wearing their uniform. And so my coworker says to me, he's like, "Hey, do you see their uniform?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I see them. They're wearing their uniform." He goes, "Yeah, their uniform is very similar to, you know, Germany during like during Hitler's reign, right? I don't know if it's like Third Reich or whatever you want to call it. I'm not the history buff, but he mentioned that it was their style and detail is very similar to when it was Nazi Germany, and I'm just like, that's crazy. I'm like, first off, how do you even know that? And second of all, like, what do you say to that? So so my cousin who lived in Germany, now he lives in the Netherlands.
Mhm.
He told me growing up and being a teenager, in all honesty, racism is still there.
Mhm.
It's still there. It has not gone away, right? You're gonna have people that are neo-Nazis that are out there that, you know, still feel like they have to carry on this hate, no different than in America with the KKK, right?
Mm.
It's still there. It's still
Oh, yeah.
prevalent. It's the only thing is that in Germany, they'll tell you, or they will definitely show you, like that's what it is, right? Like they have no issue in telling you they don't like you for the color of your skin. That's not a problem. Here in America, we have different areas that we can live in that either hide from it, or they'll blatantly tell you they don't like you because you're Black
Mhm.
or Latino or whatever other than, right?
Mhm.
So to really put, to really say on that level, yeah, I feel like it's not so much being ashamed of it, because it's like we're not persecuting people. Like, we're in the 21st century, we can't persecute people from years, over how many years ago that enslaved us, right?
Mhm.
And plus, we have our history. Being Cape Verdean, we were enslaved by
Mhm.
Portuguese, and we were ruled over them for how many years? Until
1975.
1975, people.
Yeah.
So, so it's like, where can we stop? I feel like, to really answer that question, I just don't see it. It shouldn't be a part of being ashamed.
Mhm.
It should be a lesson taught that slavery is not an answer.
Mhm.
Like it's not a point of resolve, right?
Mhm.
We already know slavery is bad, right? And that's what it should be taught. That's all it is. And we should not ignore what has happened in history. And as far as the second part of the question, where it says, should these statues be placed in the museum instead of public? I think it should just be written. I don't think we need idols to signify what happened in America, right? I don't agree with it. I don't think we need these idols to tell us what happened, because I feel like those idols will trigger an emotion for me.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'll have to see every day.
Mhm.
Whereas the history, it's in my book. If I choose to learn about that history, then it's going to be taught to me, and I
Mhm.
have it. It should be documented. It should be written. um, I just don't feel like we have to have these symbols. But if it's in a museum, I guess, sure,
Yeah. I mean,
because
I think if it's in a museum, it's kind of the same thing as if being, I guess, sort of in a history book, where
yeah,
if you choose to go and visit the museum, fine,
right.
fine. But if you don't, go, then that's another thing. But at the same time, I don't know. It's
That's a tricky. It's tricky. That's a tricky
yeah,
question. It's like I don't mind it being a museum, but then I don't want to put it in a sense where that's going to leave a person to say, well, I don't choose to want to learn about that,
yeah.
right? So I think, honestly, I think when it comes to the school system, I think we need to learn about our history. And let's
Mhm.
point out, actually, today, as we're recording, is Juneteenth,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So people need to understand, hey, this was the day that, slavery ended, right?
Mhm.
That's what Juneteenth is all about. So not everybody knew about that. I didn't know about that. I didn't know about that until I watched Blackish. Okay. So seriously, I'm going to be dead honest with you. Like, I thought it was all about the Emancipation Proclamation. Nope.
Mhm.
Let's talk about Juneteenth. And I was like, oh snap, I had no idea. So I think we need to bring the history and continue with that history. And
Mhm.
as much as it does affect us, and much as it might burn a little like hole in our chest, because it's like painful to know, it should not be forgotten, because if we forget about it, we're afraid that history is going to repeat itself.
Yeah.
That's what we need to avoid.
Mhm.
So I wish we could answer it the best way possible, but I think, that's where we have to leave it up to, the people out there. Hey, how do you feel about knowing that that image will always be there? Is that something you want to take in? You
Mhm.
know? So
Yeah, I think another question that Little Miss Anon asked that I like is what was it? I can't even find it.
I know. She had a few good
Yeah,
questions,
yeah, she
so
had like a good amount of questions.
yeah, so thanks a lot for, throwing
Yeah.
these questions on us. Got our brains working. um,
Oh, but no, the one that is, obviously really good, and it is really good to ask at this moment is, she asked, what do you think about the violence from both sides of the protest? Some of the police are definitely doing horrible and downright spiteful things, but what about the protesters that are causing violence? you know. So
Mm-hmm.
we kind of touched on that, you know, on our soapbox last week,
Mm-hmm.
but
And then
not
we
to
talked
go.
about it after the whole situation with Atlanta because you called me
Yeah, and
about
that's what I was gonna say
it.
is not to go a little bit off, you know, topic before answering this question,
Yeah.
but with, you know, the situation that happened in Atlanta with Rayshard Brooks, it's another situation where it's not necessarily as, I guess you can say, I guess, not to be punful, I guess, but not as black and white, because, you know, when I watched the video of what happened to Rayshard Brooks, I was like, ooh, you know, because this is
Bleep that out.
no, yeah.
Okay, I just
But when I watched the video, I was like, this is a little bit more complicated of a situation because technically, or not even technically, but Rayshard Brooks was resisting arrest. You know, the whole situation was completely blown out of proportion by the cops. He, you know, was, in my opinion, being detained for no good reason. The cops were being, you know, in my opinion, again, wanting to arrest him for no good reason. Once again, he was complying with them for the longest time because from the moment that they quote knocked on his window to when they shot him, that amount of time was completely unnecessary. That was about, I think, about 40 minutes, and it did, that whole, you know, situation made no sense.
Yeah.
But when they, like, if you watch the body cam footage, when they went to put the cuffs on him, he did fight back, and, you know, things like that. And
And that's just when it went
but
downhill, right?
it bothers me because I, as weird as it said, as it is to say, our parents, I guess, have quote trained us on what to do when you're dealing with the cops, and that is so stupid to say, but you have been quote trained on how to deal with the cops when you're being arrested, or it's stupid that, like, saying that just upsets me. But when you're dealing with the cops, you have to act a certain way and follow the rules. And it's so weird because it's literally damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because George Floyd followed the rules and died. Rayshard Brooks did not, I guess, follow the rules and he died. So, well, what do you do?
Right.
Because, you know, it seems like what,
Yeah.
you know, what the heck?
And
Do
that's
I quote follow the rules and I die, or do
right.
I try and run for my life, I guess, or and die? Because seems to be, you know, what's happening.
Well, to piggyback on that, so with the whole thing with Rayshard Brooks, right? Did I get his
Mhm.
name right? Just want to make sure. Thank you. So the thing is, like, you're right at the point where he complied with the officers, and until he knew that he was getting arrested, the footage just showed immediately he was like, no, I'm not getting arrested. So automatically, it's like, yeah, it makes him look guilty, right? To me, and this is my opinion, and I'm not saying this is totally correct. It just already looks bad, right?
Mhm.
Right. So here I am watching this, and I'm just like, dude, why are you running? Why? Like, just own it. You were under the influence, right? Just own it, right? Because now it does go back to the damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because now here you go running, and with everything going on, and mind you, Richard knows what's going on in America because George Floyd happened before this, right? So
Mhm.
you already know what's going on. And now this happens, right? Like you're in this position. So I feel like I wish I could see, I wish I was there, like I wish I could be in his mind to say, like, oh my God, like I don't want this stuff to happen like what happened with George Floyd, right? But instead, I don't know what was happening. But what I'm looking at is like he just wanted to flee from the cops because he didn't want to get arrested. That's just what it
Mhm.
looks like. But that doesn't take away the fact that these cops, seriously, dude's running away from you. Why are you shooting?
Yeah.
If the man is running away, and then I get it, he took your taser, but bro, he took your taser.
And you know, the thing that when I listened to, and I told you when we were on the phone the other day, when I
Mm-hmm.
listened to the sergeant and again, I don't remember if she was from Atlanta or where she was, but to give, I guess, some background information, I was watching CNN and the coverage of what happened to Rayshard Brooks, and there was a African American police sergeant who was giving her opinion, or about what happened, and she spoke about how the police officer was incorrect in what he did, where if I guess perp runs from the cops, she was like, you have a couple of options, and shooting the perp is not one of them. Number one, you can gear up for getting some exercise and you run after him, or you can let him go and you set up a perimeter. You call in backup and you set up a perimeter, because you know what? At the end of the day, you had his car. His car was sitting right beside you. So where is he gonna go? He's not gonna hop in his own car. So set up a perimeter. You use the walkie-talkie that's right there on your shoulder, and you call in, backup, and you say, I got whatever the heck he looks like, running away.
Yeah,
But,
and that's what they could have done. That's what they could have done.
Two bullets to the back.
Right. Like, seriously, dude, it's like they were afraid that the taser was going to kill them. It's like they forgot what happened. And I feel like they wanted to use the excuse of, oh my God, he stole my taser. That's why I had to shoot him to death. It's like, this is where you're wrong. It's like, and this is where, once again, for everybody listening, it's like, you have to understand when it comes to the cops and everything that's going on, and when they're talking about defunding the police, it means all this stuff that's going on with the police and all the work that they're doing, right? They're doing more work than they should. And they don't have enough education to know how to handle certain situations like that, right? So programs need to be put in place for the police. Community outreach needs to be put in place for the police. Many resources need to be allocated in other areas, and for the police, they need to know, like, hey, we need to be better educated when it comes to handling certain situations like that. And police are so reactive. They're just so reactive. And I feel like America is so reactive. It's only when stuff happens, we start blowing up. And so when it comes to protest, we're reactive.
To go back to the question, on the flip side, I do my best to pay attention to the news as often as possible, but I guess I was a bit late with this yesterday, or to finding out, because I only found out yesterday. I was shocked to find out that there's a portion of Seattle called, I guess it's like changing names or whatever. I guess it was originally called the Chaz and now it's called the Chop or whatever. But there's a portion of Seattle right now
What is that?
Literally,
I never heard of that.
It's literally I think it's the eastern side of Seattle, where they have kicked out the cops. Like, they've blocked it off and there are no cops there, because the citizens have taken over that area. They were protesters that have taken over that section of the city or whatever. And I'm just like, okay, that's a bit much, so yeah, that's the other side of the question that we're answering, where it's just it's very, very confusing, I guess, where we're doing a lot. Like,
I think that's too, but see, that's the thing. I think America's not, you're talking about this one town, right? That's able to have the ability to not have it policed, right? That's that community. Now, if we're saying if America can get into that level, yeah, it's not going to be in my lifetime. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't see that happening. I think there's just too much going on in this world, as far as like, even breaking it down. You know what? Let's break it down for even just a little bit for those big cities, right? Let's talk about New York. Let's talk about LA, right? Where, let's look at their crime rate, right? And what are those crimes, right? So that's where you really have to start. If you're going to start, right? I mean, you have to look at how America is as far as like dealing with certain crime, and what are those crimes like entail, and what, like, does it require the success force? Does it require, more research? Does it require outreach for other communities to come in to work on, such as mental health or, level of human resources? That I don't see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not anytime soon, to answer that question. And going to that point where, we can like just get rid of the police totally. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't see that happening in this lifetime.
Yeah.
I think we can get police on a level where they don't have as much on their plate, because I think that's what's causing a lot of these issues. I feel like a lot of stuff gets dumped on the police, where they feel like the only resolution to a lot of those things, like domestic violence calls and all those things, like it's the police have to come in because everybody's so quick to call the police,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
So
I said it to you. I believe it was you, but either way,
I believe it was, you only
no,
talk
there
to
was
me.
actually I think it was my friend of mine, but no, there was a post on Instagram that stuck with me, and I was just like, oh well, fuck, because this is it was really something that stuck with me. And first of all, there's the Black Lives Matter movement, but then there's I guess you can say almost extremist or whatever, where they have the ACAB acronym, where it's all cops are bastards. And I don't believe that, because a lot, I have, literally one family member that was a cop and then retired. But
Right. No, just to put that out there, and this is fact, not all cops are assholes. All
no,
cops have a bias.
yeah.
That's what needs to be talked about when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to all cops. Everybody has a bias. Like everybody in America, and I don't care who you are. I know you're listening right now. We are all biased. That is human. That's just
Of
common.
course.
The point that we need to talk about is how cops need to understand this bias and how to work with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not all cops are racist. So let's
No.
put it out there. Not all cops are white, guys. Hi. Let's just put that out there. There are also, I have friends and family who are cops and they are not black. I mean,
Yeah.
or white.
Yeah, get the words right. But no, so there was a posting on Instagram, and when I read it, I was just like, wow, he or she, I don't know, because couldn't see the person's face, but the posting said that it was like a confession from a bastard cop. And then the posting literally was saying how I am a cop, and then it said I am a social worker, I am a divorce counselor, and it was just like voicing how cops
Mm-hmm.
are all of these other things, because when you
Right.
call the cops, they have to be all of these things.
Everything.
Exactly, because
Right.
they're the
They're
first on
over
the scene.
police. It's
They're
over.
the first on the scene for a crap ton of things that we have
Right.
to, they have to deal with
Correct.
before somebody else shows up. So I'm
Yeah,
not
and
going to say give them a
but
break.
that's the thing. We rely on the police for all these things, to be a social worker, to be a counselor, to be
Mm-hmm.
listen. No. This is where a community needs to get together with the police, right? To
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, listen, this is what we have with the issues in our community.
Yeah.
Whether it's drugs, whether it's guns, whether it's domestic violence. These are things that people should know. You live in your town and you think you live in your town just to be like, oh, I just pay taxes and go to work and come home. This is where everybody needs to start educating themselves and say, hey, listen, why do I live in this town? What are the good and what are the bad? Right? And then work with the bad and understand, like, is this something that can be dealt with by me, by my neighbors, by my community, by the police, by your mayor? These are the things that you got to start small, because you don't want to end up in a situation where you do protest, right? And then these protesters that come out, it's all anger,
Mm-hmm.
justifiable anger at best, right?
Yeah.
But then you have that level of looters and stuff like that. Well, they're ruining the community.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't agree with people who just want to just destroy stuff, right? And then you want to sit there and say, oh, well, you know what? They're destroying lives and bodies and stuff. And it's like, yeah, but let's repair that.
Yeah. And to go off of that, and actually quote, moving forward, we had both Little Miss Anon and Josh, who also asked a question. They almost asked the same question, which is calling for peace, which their questions differ in a little bit of a way. Mm-hmm. Where Little Miss Anon asked on a more wholesome note, She asked, what do you think about old photos depicting yellow pearl, black power, the LGBTQ community, and other movements of people of color supporting one another? And
Mhm.
then Josh asked, do you think we'll ever fully reach a time where everyone is equal no matter what they are? But both of those questions are kind of similar in a way, because they both, revolve around two things. So when it comes to Little Miss Anon's question, um, hers kind of deals with going back into the past where, all these different, communities where, people of color or, the LGBTQ community, which I hate using the word, but they're both minority communities,
Mhm.
were both fighting for equal rights. This was in the past and,
Right.
in the 60s, 70s, and things like that. But they're fighting for equal rights and trying to be almost, recognized as human, because that's what it comes down to, is the not being recognized as human people. And, that was in the past. And some would say, oh, it's happened. We're good. We're, normal human people who have
Mhm.
already reached maximum capacity for equal rights. Obviously, that's not the case.
Right. I
And
mean,
with Josh's question, he's asking about now.
yeah,
So
and
obviously, Little Miss Anon's question, it has not happened. We have been working together for decades, and we're, at the point of blowing up at the seam for, with anger, because we are not being treated correctly. We're not being treated
well,
as,
just to interject on that. So here's the thing, though. Um, we've come along.
yeah, we've
We've come a
definitely.
long way, because if you really think about it, let's talk about the civil rights, going back to civil rights movement in the 60s and stuff, right? We have come a long way,
Mhm.
but I think people just don't seem to get that, the 1960s, and mind you, this was the late 1960s, right? It's not that far long ago. That was just what, approximately 40, 45 years ago?
Yeah.
That's not a long time ago, people, right? And I think that's what, think about the time, from the time Martin Luther King passed away,
Hmm.
right? 1968.
Yeah.
So think about it. Look where we're at. It's
Yeah.
not that long ago. And here we are. We keep looking at how we keep seeing history keep repeating itself, right? It's like, you know what? Actually, it's good, because Miss Anand, she even brought up one of the points. Like, she's like, um, finally, on a more wholesome note, what do you think about old photos depicting like yellow peril, black power, LGBT community, and other movements for people of color supporting one another, right? So kind of like to stem to that, right?
Yeah.
Of all the things that are going on now, looking, going back to history, in the 60s, of all those movements going on, it's the same people
Yeah.
supporting each other. If not,
Exactly.
if not more, right?
Mhm.
Because now we think of like the Black Lives Matter protests that are going on. I see a bunch of white people going out there.
Mhm.
They woke up.
Mhm.
Everybody, wake up, right? I can tell you right now, if you go back into the 60s and compare photos to those protests, I'll tell you right now, there's a lot more white people
Yeah.
that are out there now,
Yeah.
right? Because they've realized, like, dang, we didn't really get far. We lost the message. And that's what I think, that's where we keep losing that message. It's like,
Mhm.
we put it out there. Let's see if we can continue letting people know,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
In order for all lives to matter, the Black Lives Matter has to work. We have to mend that,
Mhm.
we have to fix it. So let's stop repeating it ourselves. Let's continue to educate ourselves and let people know, like, racism is wrong, and it doesn't, and we'll keep sending those messages. So yeah, when it comes to seeing the comparison of old photos being depicted for now, it just goes to show how history keeps repeating itself, and when are we going to stop doing that,
Yeah.
right? So, like, I think it to me, my opinion to it is, I'm glad they're doing that, because it's starting to show our generation, like, wow, nothing, it's going to keep going on until we do something about it. Do we want to keep seeing those images? Do we want to live in a world that continues on with that stuff? No, we don't. But how are we going to get our message out,
Mhm.
So that's where everybody here has to start, whether if it's to donate, whether if it's to like really call it out on people, there might be times where, like there's a friend of yours that just keeps throwing those stupid jokes, those stupid dumb jokes. And
Yeah.
you're like, that's it. Charlie, I just want to let you know you're racist. Charlie, I've been your friend for so long, tired of it. Just gotta let you know, stop telling those jokes. You're racist. But let them know. Say, Charlie, just want to let you know, those jokes are offensive. I just need you to chill out. I've been sucking it all in this whole time, and now I really want to let you know I don't like it when you make those jokes. But maybe that's another conversation. But yeah, I mean, that's just how it is. We keep repeating history, right? Remember, Rodney King suffered this in '92. I witnessed that on TV when that first happened. I was like, dang. Before social media, that sucker hit the news. And it was like, first time we're starting to see like this is ongoing. So let's stop that now. Let's stop repeating history. Let's just read it in our books, and let's not forget and how we can continue telling to our generation and future generation, it's unacceptable. We love everybody, and everybody needs to respect each other.
Yep.
So we need another question. Oh, do we have time? Are we running out of time?
We have run out of time, but I will,
Dang.
No, so
I was like waiting. I'm like,
I will address
time?
Josh's question because it's a good one, and then we'll end there.
All right, good.
Josh did ask, do you think we'll ever fully reach a time where everyone is equal no matter what they are? And I hope so. I think it's whenever, because
he wants you to answer that question, right? Yes or no?
No, so when people ask that question, it's really an interesting question for me to think about because it's weird because at the end of the day we're all human, no matter where we come from, no matter where we live, but then we are different, we all come from different backgrounds, we all live, have different cultures. But then I always do, and I guess this is because of where, what I went to school for. I quote globalization like a crazy person, like I do. And, my dad, my dad hates globalization. He absolutely hates it. He talks about how Cape Verde has completely changed and not necessarily for the better because of globalization. And he probably doesn't even know what it really is, but he's just like, Cape Verdean kids in Cape Verde now are not the same as when he was living in Cape Verde. That phone.
Look at that. See, that's your ringer. That's time's up.
But at the end of the day, I do hope that we will be able to come together and not be separated by what we are, but who we are, and not be separated at all. Let us just all just be quote human, because that's all we are. Like if the color of my skin versus the color of your skin versus the color of somebody else's skin doesn't matter, because you know what, we can literally not give a shit about the color of somebody's skin, and you know what, tomorrow we can separate it by the color of our eyes. You know what, Gina, my eye color is a lot lighter than yours, so I'm better than you. Or
I actually love the fact that you brought that up because so Jane Elliott, I don't know if you've heard of her.
I love her.
Right. So when you brought that up, it reminds me of Jane Elliott and how, being a school teacher, she's white, and
she did a test on that.
She did the test on that. And I'll never forget that because it's one, it kind of goes back to when we talked about, it's taught, right? To hate. It's taught because as a child, like as you're growing up, you don't learn that. You don't learn that. I mean, sorry. You are taught that when you're growing, but you're not born with it, So think of a child growing up and has no clue about it, right? But then when you bring them when they start to grow up into this world and they are uneducated, they don't know about it, and they automatically just assume like, oh, I am this person and this is all I need to know. That becomes the issue where, there's stuff around us that still needs to get fixed. So when we do these protests, I love globalization in the sense where we all understand it's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you're looking at, think of this virus, we all know it's wrong. We all
Mm-hmm.
know it's bad. We want to fix it, right? So
Yeah.
let's look at it in that way. Racism is wrong.
Yeah.
Let's fix it. We can't find a vaccine. There's no vaccine for racism. The vaccine I see for racism is your education
Yeah.
and your willingness to open up to what's in front of you, right? That's what I look at it. So I feel like, yeah, we could. I say anything can happen. Anything is possible, right? To answer your friend's question, anything is possible but we have to put our part in. And it's whether if your friend Josh is able to open up to his friends and to his family and question his race or ethnicity, and say, hey, listen, where are we coming from? How were you, like, as his parents or friends or whatever growing up? How did they deal with that?
Yeah.
Because for us being Cape Verdeans, colorism has always been an issue,
Oh, yeah.
right? And so that's one of the things that we have to realize, like, in order for us as the world itself to understand, like, we want to be equal, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to be equal. But in order for us to get there is we need to let the world know that this thing is wrong. And racism is wrong. Racism is like the virus.
Yeah.
Stop. Just find a vaccine. It's killing
Yeah.
us. It's killing us. So, but yeah, I honestly, I'm so happy that we had questions. It's great. I love Q&A. So hopefully we can definitely continue on with this.
Yeah.
So,
And for the next Q&A, because we still have more questions to answer, so
yes,
we'll answer more and hopefully get more. So
yes.
I'm
So
gonna put
remember, wherever
our
this,
email, and yeah, so
where's
our
the,
email will be down below, and
yes,
send us more questions and we'll answer them on our next Q&A, and be on the lookout for our next soapbox. And we're gonna have a couple of interviews coming with some people.
yes,
So
I know.
yeah, but
We're
be
gonna
on the lookout
continue.
for some more content. Gina doing something weird.
I could do. Hey, if it gets people to watch us.
All right, so see you guys in the next video.
Thank you all.
Yep, thanks so much.